everyone to a Hillel event. My name is Jessica Peskin and I'm the president of Hillel. Hillel is the Jewish organization on campus, but any students can join. Our treasurer is here as well, and her name is Hannah Serko. Thank you all for coming out. Tonight you're in for a great time. Tonight's program is called, What is the Purpose of Life? This question has been pondered for years, but tonight we'll hear another interpretation of what it means. First, we'll hear a lecture from the amazing Rabbi Yohanan, and then we'll have a question and answer session, and finally we'll conclude with a game to see if you can answer questions about the lecture. We have 6 $25 Amazon gift cards to give away to Penn State students, so make sure you stick around for that at the end. And now, please welcome Rabbi Binyamin Yohanan, who will talk to us about the purpose of life.
Thank you. I would like to thank Penn State University and Penn State Hillel, and especially Jessica Peskin, who organizes these classes. Thank you. And today we are speaking about a very important topic. All of us who are alive need to know why we are alive. For what reason were we created? And what is God expecting of us? We were created as human beings, and thank God for that. But what makes us different than animals? Are we different than animals? And if we are, then we have to know what is our function in this world other than what animals do: eating, reproduction, and just being part of the food chain. So we will try to address this question, and I will give 3 answers. One will concentrate on our relationship to the world. Another one will concentrate on our relationship to ourselves. And the third one will concentrate on our relationship with God. Because a human being is created not in a vacuum, but he's created as part of the world. And therefore, we have a relationship towards the world. In fact, our sages say that each individual is part of an organic whole, together with the rest of the universe. And to understand our function in the world as it relates to the planet Earth and to the universe, we look at the way God created the first man, Adam HaRishon. And in fact, we see that man, the human being, was created alone, not as a nation, not as a race, not as a family, but one individual. From here, our sages derive that the entire universe was created for just one human being. It was worth it to create all the galaxies, all the stars, all the planets, only for one human being. That's how important human life is. But that doesn't stop there. What about us? There are 7 billion of us. Doesn't mean that human life now is less valuable. After all, I'm only 1 out of 7 billion, but our sages say no. Just like the first man was created alone, so too every human being is obligated to say, the world was created for me. God created the entire universe for me. As selfish as it may sound, in reality, it is not. In reality, it defines our job in the universe. If I'm the only human being in the universe, that means I'm responsible for everything that goes on. And if I see that something needs help on my part, something needs improvement, it is my responsibility, because the whole world was created for me. And therefore, I am the manager of the entire universe. That's how our sages describe our function in this world. The entire world was created for me, not only to enjoy, but to take care of. I, every person must say, am the manager of the universe. I take care of it. If anything needs to be done, I don't shift responsibility and blame. I take it upon myself, and I try to fix and do whatever is necessary to better the world. This concept is called tikkun olam, fixing the world or making the world a better place. And we see this from the conversation between God and the first human being, Adam. God said to Adam, I'm placing you in the Garden of Eden in order to work it and to guard it. So the human being is placed in this beautiful world, like the Garden of Eden, with so many pleasures. But God tells us, you have a function in this world. You must guard the world from destruction, from waste, and you have to work the world to make it even better than what I gave you. In fact, once a philosopher asked a Jewish rabbi, he said, whose actions are better, God's actions or human actions? He expected that the rabbi will say, of course, God's actions are greater. And then he would say, if that's so, why do Jewish people do circumcision? If God created perfect world, if God's works are great, why are you damaging them by doing circumcision? But the rabbi did not answer like that. The rabbi said, human beings' actions are greater than God's. And the philosopher was surprised. He said, what do you mean? And the rabbi asked his servant to bring a few grains of wheat and a piece of cake. And he presented it in front of the philosopher, and he said, which one would you like to eat? And the philosopher said, of course, I would like to eat the cake. So the rabbi said, this is the answer to your question. The kernels of wheat are the creation of God. The piece of cake is the creation of a human being. And you see that the creation of the human being is greater than creation of God. But it's puzzling. Is it really true? If we look at the molecular structure of a kernel of grain, we will see that it's actually much more complicated than the molecular structure of a piece of cake. A human being, by taking any plant or any animal and killing it and cooking it and blending it and mixing it, we actually make it more basic. We destroy the complicated, wonderful proteins and enzymes and vitamins, and we make it much more simple. So how is it that human actions are better than God's? In reality, they're not. We cannot create even one grain of wheat. We cannot create even one living cell. The answer is that God left the world unfinished. God left the world in a state that we can add effort on our own and make the world better according to our standards. According to objective standards, it's not really better. By cutting down the plant, we're killing the plant, we're making it less. By killing an animal, and as I said, cooking it, we're making it less. But we are making the world a better place for ourselves. We are making the food more suitable for human consumption. There are some areas that God left for us to improve. And according to Jewish law, every Jewish male needs circumcision. Why? Because that serves as a covenant between us and God. We show him that we're committed, so committed to him that we're willing to give up a small part of our own body for him. Be it as it may, we see that the human being was created alone to give him the responsibility for the entire world. We see from the story of the rabbi and the philosopher that God gave humans areas in life where they can make God's actions better. And that is the first purpose in life, to behave as if you are the manager of the world and care for the world. Make sure you don't destroy the world. Make sure you don't unnecessarily waste Earth's natural resources. That is purpose number one. God created man with intellect to take care of inanimate objects, to take care of plant life, and to take care of the animal life. Without human being, the earth would not be as beautiful, would not be as productive. Now, we go to the second purpose in life, and that is the relationship between us and God. Our sages again say that God created the world because he wanted to give. God is a giver. He is the perfect giver who does not take anything back. He only gives. But when God was alone in the world, before the universe was created, there was no one to whom he could give. And therefore, God, we can say it, was imperfect. As great God is, as perfect God is, but his greatness and his goodness was incomplete because there was no one to bestow the goodness upon. And so God needed to create something outside of himself, a creation, so that he can give of himself to that creation. And in fact, he did. He created the entire universe, but he did not stop there. He created plant life, and he did not stop there. He said, it's not enough that I give plants rain in its right time and sunshine in its right time and carbon dioxide in the right proportion. I want to give more to those who have more intellect than a plant. So he created animal life, and he was giving sustenance and warmth and pleasure to the animal kingdom. And he said, I want to give more. It's not enough that a cat eats a nice meal, sits in sunshine, and enjoys its life. I love that. I want every living being to enjoy. But I want more than that. And he created human life. He created the first man, and from him the whole humanity. Why? Because he said, I want to give, but the greatest giving is when there is consciousness, when there is intelligence. I want to create a being that is like God in its intelligence and in its freedom of choice. However, for this being to be happiest and godlike, he has to be independent. And therefore, God created the human being with freedom of will. But that dictates that the human being will only be happy if he will have his own achievements, if he will put in effort and he will gain reward. Plant or an animal don't need to put in effort. They can just sit in one place like a cow, just walking in the field and eating. There's a full pasture of beautiful, luscious green grass, delicious grass for it to eat for the rest of its life. It doesn't need to put in any effort. Day in and day out, from sunrise to sunset, it just sits in or stands in one place and eats and enjoys. But for an independent being to be happy, it has to feel its independence. It has to feel that it achieved something on his own. Therefore, God said, I created a human being with intelligence. But unfortunately, I cannot just give the human beings pleasure non-stop, because they will not appreciate it. In fact, we know when too much pleasure is given to a human being, the human being dies. Once they conducted an experiment in the former Soviet Union, where they took a cat and they made a cut in its skull, and they found a place in the brain that signals pleasure, and they attached electrodes connected to a battery, and they put in front of the cat a button, a large button that the cat can press, and when the cat presses the button, the electric current is activated and the signal of pleasure is sent to its brain. And they taught the cat to press the button, and the cat started pressing the button and enjoying. Every time it pressed, it enjoyed some more. And it continued non-stop. And they put in front of the cat some delicious food and some milk, and even a female cat right next to it. But the cat did not look at anything. It just continued pressing that button and enjoying and enjoying and enjoying until the cat died from starvation. And this is not only true for cats. Unfortunately, this is true with human beings. If you give human beings undeserved free pleasure, they deteriorate. As we see, when a human being has access to narcotics, for example, they don't want to go to work, they don't want to study, they just want to have pleasure. They just want to put it in themselves and enjoy, even though eventually it leads to their death. So God knew our nature, and He said, a human being will not be satisfied with just pleasure. He needs to feel satisfaction from having earned the pleasure himself. And even though God created the world for pleasure, He wants to give us. But in order for us to have ultimate pleasure, there has to be a place for us to earn it. And for that end, He placed tests for us. And these tests are moral choices that we need to make. And in Torah, the Jewish Bible, they're called mitzvot, commandments. What are commandments? Commandments are instructions from God on how He sees the best way for us to live our life. He does not put us into this world and let us be on our own, try to fight for ourselves and try to reinvent the wheel. He gives us instructions, just like automobile manufacturer gives us user manual, what gas to put in, what oil to use, so that your car can function in the most optimal way. So too God said, I created you and I created the world. I know what actions are healthy, are beneficial for you. And I know which set of actions will provide you with the greatest amount of pleasure over the course of your life. And that's the trick. We are all beings that seek pleasure. We have pleasure sensors, receptors, and we feel good when we have it. And that is built in so that we search out for more opportunities for pleasure. But God tells us, don't go overboard, because the goal in life is not to get the highest pleasure for one moment and then to die, but rather to have the highest average amount of pleasure over the course of your life. Which means instead of having a spike and then deep valley, the goal is to have constant high level of pleasure every moment of your life. And the only way to achieve it is by following the commandments that God gave us, the instructions. And some of these instructions are logical. For example, honor your parents. If you honor the older generation, you will learn from them, from their experience, how to live better. Some of them are logical, like don't steal, because if you steal, someone will steal from you. If you kill, someone will kill you, and that's the end of your life. If you live in a moral, just society, it will be better for you. And some of them are less logical. For example, laws of kosher food. Don't eat pork, but eat beef. Eat an animal after you kill it, not while it's alive. We might understand why it's cruel to eat an animal alive, but why is beef any better than pork? And even though there are theories to explain how beef is more healthy than pork, but those theories don't have to be necessarily true. God did not give us a reason why Jewish people should eat beef instead of pork, but we should just trust Him that He, as creator of human life and of the pig, He knows that for a human organism, for some reason unknown to us, it's not healthy to eat pork. It's not healthy to eat blood. It's not healthy to eat crabs or lobsters. And that is true for all commandments, all mitzvot, that every commandment is an instruction by the Creator Himself, by the manufacturer, on how to use our body, how to use our life to gain the most possible pleasure over the course of your life. Now, this is on a simple level. The word mitzvah, commandment, is instruction on how to live life to achieve greatest pleasure. On a deeper level, the word mitzvah, commandment, comes from the word tzav, means to command, but the word tzav in its root form is connected to the word that is translated as companionship, connection, relationship. And that means that God is providing us with opportunities to connect to Him. Whenever we do a commandment of God, whenever we choose a moral choice over an immoral choice, whenever we choose to put in effort to improve our well-being or well-being of the world, we are connecting to God. We are coming closer to God. We are forming a relationship with God. So therefore, the commandments that God gives us are really opportunities for us to connect to Him. As Judaism teaches us that since God gives us so much, how can we ever say thank you to Him? And in fact, God doesn't need anything from us. No sacrifices will improve Him, will give Him pleasure. He doesn't need it. He doesn't need a rub on His back. He doesn't need food or drink. He doesn't need songs. What can we give Him? So there are some things that we can give Him. And that is, number one, appreciation. When we turn back and say thank you, even if I don't need anything, but seeing that you're happy makes me happy. And how do I know that you're happy? When you say thank you. If I give something to a person and he's just taking it with a sad face, I have no idea. Am I making him happy? Is he enjoying the gifts that I'm showering him? Is he enjoying the food that I cooked for him? I have no idea. But when he smiles back and says thank you, it makes me feel better. I know that my purpose in giving him the gifts and showering him with pleasure was fulfilled. I achieved my goal of making him happy. So too, when God gives us and gives us and gives us again, and we just take without acknowledging who it's coming from and appreciating it and thanking Him, the purpose of creation is not fulfilled. But when we turn back and we say, thank you, God, for my life. Thank you, God, for my health. Thank you for this apple that you created. Thank you for this cup of water that you created. Thank you for giving me this pleasure, this food, this beautiful sight, this relationship. Every time we say thank you, we are making God happy. And again, it's important to remember, not because God needs it, but because His purpose in creating the world was to make us happy, to give us pleasure. And we get more pleasure when we appreciate, when we look back and don't take things for granted, but say, look, I have my life. I have my parents. I have my siblings. I have my wife. I have my children. I have my friends. I have health, and I have my house, and I have my car, and I have my clothing. When we appreciate, we become happy. And when we are happy, God is happy. And one more thing that we can do to God to return the favor that He's doing to us is to listen to Him. God does not need our favors. God does not need anything from us. But if God in the Jewish Bible, in the Torah wrote, keep the Sabbath day, if He wrote, eat kosher, if He wrote, marry certain people but don't marry close relatives or those that are already married, and we listen to Him, He has sort of pleasure. God does not feel pleasure. He's not a human. But in our terms, when we ask someone for something and they do it, we feel good that we have been heard. So when we listen to God, we give him pleasure. Especially if we take upon ourselves to do commandments, to make moral choices as a thank you to God. We say, God, you gave me so much. How can I ever pay back to you? You know what? I know that in the Torah you asked us to keep Shabbat, to keep Sabbath. And as a thank you for you, you have done for me so much. Let me at least keep Shabbat for you. I will do it as a thank you to you. Then all our actions and every commandment we fulfill becomes a thank you to God for giving us so much pleasure in life. And that is the proper attitude for every human being to have in life. God, you created the world for me in order to give me pleasure, and I'm ready to accept that pleasure. But the ultimate pleasure is when I put in effort, I make moral choices, and I feel I earned the reward in the form of pleasure. And in order to make myself more happy, I will appreciate everything that you give me, and I will thank you. And as a sign of thanks, I will take upon myself to be your loyal servant. You've done so much for me, so I will do for you the little things that you tell me to do. Work for 6 days, and you want to take a break anyway, so rest on the 7th. But don't just take vacation. Rest on the 7th day because God told you so. And then instead of just a day off, it will be your service of God. It will be your appreciation of God. It will be your thank you to God for giving you so much pleasure. And one more point. Ultimately, Judaism teaches us that pleasure in this world is limited. And anything limited is not perfect, because eventually it will come to an end. And it's as if it never existed. Our life is 70, 80, or 90 years. And then total darkness. We forget everything. Is it possible that God is playing a game with us? He created us to show us all the possible pleasures in the world. As an adult showing delicious candy to a child and then hiding it, so to God is giving us a few decades to enjoy life, and then he is taking it away from us forever. For millions of years, we're going to exist in complete darkness without any awareness. That cannot be. God, who is kind and merciful, who is good and wants to give good, would not give us such imperfect good, such temporary good, which is only teasing us. Therefore, Judaism teaches us that God created another world, which is eternal, in which to give us infinite, eternal pleasure. In this world, our pleasure is limited to our brain. Our brain is physical. It has only a limited number of connections and neurons and nerves that carry signals of pleasure. Our pleasure in this life is limited in quality and in quantity and in its time, only during our lifetime. But in the next world, which is a spiritual world, the world of souls, of neshama, we're not limited by physical laws. We are infinite. The soul is infinite. And therefore, the kind of pleasure that it can experience is infinite in its quality. No pleasure in this world, even if you take all the pleasure of all the people in the world over the entire human existence and you concentrate it into one pleasurable moment and you give it to one person, it will not equal the pleasure of one moment in the next world. Why? Because the soul in the next world is infinite, and infinity cannot be compared to the limited, although large, amount of pleasure in this world. So the good being, God, who created this world to give us pleasure, cannot be that he created us with a limited lifetime. It must be that he created the world that we should be able to live forever. This physical world is the world of effort, the world of action, the world of achievement, in order to give us independent beings feeling that we deserve the reward. And then when we go to the next world, in addition to millions of pleasurable experiences that we had in this world, in the next world we are going to have infinite pleasure forever. And that is the second purpose of our life. God created us in order to give us pleasure. Not only temporary pleasure, ultimate pleasure, infinite pleasure. And we learned how do you achieve the most pleasure in your lifetime in this world? By following God's laws, instructions for successful life. And that will also guarantee that you will have infinite pleasure forever in the next world. So far, we covered two ways to explain why are we in this world. Humans were created in order to be managers of the entire universe, to oversee the universe, make sure the universe does not get destroyed, to improve it, to take care of the inanimate world, to the plant world, and to animal world. Number two, the relationship between us and God. God created the world in order to give us pleasure in this world, maximum pleasure in this world by following his instructions, and pleasure in the next world, the ultimate pleasure, infinite pleasure of the world to come. Now we will come to the third purpose of our existence, and that is our relationship to ourselves. First was the relationship to the world, second was the relationship to God, and now relationship to ourselves. Once a student asked Rabbi Yeshaya Karelitz, the famous Chazon Ish, who passed away about 70 years ago. He asked him, what is the highest level that a human being can achieve in this world? And Rabbi Yeshaya Karelitz answered, it is to live a full life without hurting anyone. Very surprising answer. He did not say you should live in a monastery for the rest of your life, meditating and praying to God, connecting to God. He did not say you have to learn the entire wisdom that there is to learn. Rather, he said, it is to be very careful not to hurt anyone throughout your lifetime. Why is it so important? And that is because More important than becoming closer to God, having connection with God, what is more important than having pleasure in this world, than earning ultimate reward in the next world? What can be more important than that? There is something even more important than that. And again, let me phrase the question. What is more important than having relationship with God, connection and closeness to God? What is more important than earning reward in this life and in the next world is being like God, becoming like God Himself. That will give a human being the greatest pleasure. When we become so independent that we become like God Himself. And how do we become like God Himself? And the answer to this is by emulating God, by becoming like God. Just like God is good and He is a total giver, He does not take only, He only gives, so too we. If we give more than we take, we become like God. The more we give, the more of givers we become, the more godly we become. And we know this from the story of Abraham, our forefather. When he was sitting by his tent, God came to him. He was meditating and he was prophesying. He had communion, he had relationship, revelation, communication with God. At that moment, he raised his eyes and he saw in the distance there were 3 strangers walking through the desert. And Abraham turned to God and said, God, please wait here for me. Let me take care of them first. And Abraham left God, so to say, and he ran to the 3 strangers and he invited them into his house. He washed their feet. He served them with a kingly meal. And only after they left did he go back speaking to God. And our sages ask, how is it possible that Abraham abandoned God, communication with God, and went to serve people? And they answer, because speaking to God is good, but being like God is even better. When you take care of others, you become like God. And that is the third purpose of our existence, to become like God. And that means to be a giver. How do we become a giver? You have to work on your character traits, because a human being is born selfish. By nature, a baby cannot give. A baby is dependent. A dependent being takes. A dependent being demands, because without it cannot survive. As the baby matures, it can now start taking care of itself. And as it grows even more, it can take care of its younger siblings. It can already offer some help to his parents. And when the young child becomes adult, he becomes independent enough that he stops taking from his parents and he takes upon himself to take care of someone else by getting married, taking a spouse. And now he turns from a taker into a giver. And in a perfect world, he will be a perfect giver. He will give to his spouse everything that it takes. He will give to the spouse more than he takes. And then he will start having children. And every child is another opportunity to give, to be more godlike. And in a perfect world, the parent will give everything to their child. And then the sphere of influence will be increased to members of community, to friends, to more and more distant relatives. And eventually such a person who is a giver will become the leader of the community, will become the leader of the town, the leader of a country. And he will become more and more godlike. That is the definition of greatness. The more you give to others, the greater you are. The more independent you become, and the more godlike you become. However, when you take, that defines you as a dependent being. And as a dependent being, you're not like God. A person who is a taker, he is not God-like. So that is the third purpose of our life. We're created as a dependent takers, and we have to work on our character traits: generosity and greed, being having alacrity or laziness, anger or patience, and using all character traits in the proper measure at the right time in order to give the most and take the least, to become just like God, who is giving, who is patient, who is slow to anger. Now, this is a lifelong pursuit. As one time a convert or convert-to-be came to Hillel, the sage, the famous sage, and said, "Rabbi, teach me the entire Torah, the entire Bible, while I stand on one foot," which means make it quick. And Hillel said, "What is hateful to you, don't do to others." That is the entire Torah, and the rest is the commentary. Go learn how to do it. In this brief encounter, we learn what is the purpose of life. Don't do to others what is hateful to you. But how do you do that? For that, you have the entire Torah. Go and study and learn how to be a giver and how not to be a taker, and how to fulfill the words of Chazon Ish, who said the highest level a human being can reach is to go through the entire life and not hurt anyone. Thank you for your attention. If you have questions, you're welcome to ask. Otherwise, I'm giving the floor to Jessica, who will ask you her questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi, for coming, and thank you for the lecture. I hope everyone enjoyed it. If anybody has any questions to ask, you could do it now or type it in the chat. And then if not, we'll start the game.